Remember sitting in those dark theaters, watching your favorite stars light up the screen? Well, here's what they never told us. While we were falling in love with their characters, these actors were falling apart in real life. And honestly, some of their true stories are more dramatic than any movie they ever made. You know how we all thought old Hollywood was this glamorous, perfect world? Boy, were we wrong. These stars didn't just act in dramas, they lived them. From hidden romances and destructive habits to scandals that almost brought down the whole industry, these actors weren't just famous. They were walking headlines, waiting to happen. They broke hearts, bent rules, and sometimes crossed lines nobody should cross. Some made it through, others didn't survive the pressure. But every single one left behind stories that'll make you see Hollywood's golden years in a whole new light. So grab a cup of coffee, because by the time we're done, you'll understand why they say fame is a dangerous game. Clark Gable, Hollywood's king with a hidden past. Clark Gable was the guy every man wanted to be and every woman dreamed about. That mustache, that smile, that voice that could melt butter. He really was the king of Hollywood. But behind that perfect image were struggles that started way back in rural Ohio, where his dad thought he wasn't tough enough for farm work. That feeling of not measuring up, it stuck with him his whole life. Behind those studio gates, Gable's story gets complicated. Remember Loretta Young, that sweet actress from all those wholesome movies? Well, decades later, through her daughter, a shocking story emerged about their time filming Call of the Wild. What happened between them resulted in a pregnancy that could have ended both their careers. So, what did the studio do? They made it all disappear. Young vanished for months, had her baby in secret, then pretended to adopt her own child. Can you imagine? Gable had a reputation as quite the ladies' man. Affairs with married women, countless flings, and MGM's fixers worked overtime keeping it all quiet. A publicist from back then put it perfectly. You just had to keep the press happy and the police away. To his fans, he was Rhett Butler, the ultimate romantic hero. But in private, he was a man carrying heavy burdens. When his third wife, Carol Lombard, passed away in a plane crash in 1942, something in him broke. Friends said he was never the same, turning more and more to the bottle to cope with the loss. Speaking of broken hearts, wait till you hear about another Hollywood legend who spent decades living a painful double life. Judy Garland, Dorothy's heartbreaking journey. Oh, Judy, sweet Judy Garland, that little girl who sang about finding happiness somewhere over the rainbow. She never found her own happy ending. Born Frances Gumm in small-town Minnesota, she was pushed onto stages before she could even properly walk by a mother desperate for the spotlight. When MGM signed her at just 16, they didn't see a teenager. They saw a product, and boy, did they treat her like one. During The Wizard of Oz, they put this young girl on a routine that'd horrify any parent today. Stimulants to keep her going through 18-hour days, then sedatives to help her rest. Her diet? Chicken soup and cigarettes. They actually encouraged her to smoke 80 a day to keep her weight down. Can you believe that? The studio treated her like a machine, not a person. When she gained weight, they shamed her in front of everyone. When she couldn't keep up, they gave her more pills. By her early 20s, Garland was completely dependent on the medications MGM had started her on. She tried breaking free so many times, but the damage, it was already done. Her personal life crumbled. 5 marriages, each ending in chaos and heartbreak. Friends said she was desperately searching for the love and stability she'd never had as a child. She'd give her whole heart to relationships, only to watch them fall apart when her struggles took over. On stage, she was pure magic. Audiences could feel her pain, and it made her performances unforgettable. But offstage, she was slowly fading away. In 1969, at just 47 years old, Judy Garland's life ended in a London hotel bathroom from an accidental overdose. The girl who sang about bluebirds and happiness never found her own peace. Her story sparked outrage about how Hollywood failed its young stars. But for Judy, it was too late. She remains a heartbreaking reminder of talent destroyed by an industry that cared more about money than people. Now, let's talk about the bad boy who changed acting forever. Marlon Brando, the revolutionary who couldn't find peace. Marlon Brando didn't just act, he exploded onto screens like a force of nature. When he showed up in A Streetcar Named Desire, everything changed. Hollywood had never seen anything like him. But that intensity? It came from a childhood that would have broken most people. His father drank too much and used his fists, while his mother battled her own demons with alcohol. Young Marlon learned early that the world could be unpredictable and violent. His talent came with a price. Brando was intense, unpredictable, and emotionally explosive. He had affairs with both women and men, went through marriages like they were movie roles, and once admitted, "I'm not sure I'm a human being." Behind all that fame was a man haunted by tragedy. His son, Christian, was involved in a fatal shooting of his sister's boyfriend. Years later, his daughter Cheyenne took her own life. Brando was devastated and never really recovered. He fought with studios, turned down their rules, and famously refused his Oscar for The Godfather. His political views were bold, but his behavior often pushed people away. Co-stars called him brilliant and maddening, loving one minute, completely distant the next. Brando lived like someone constantly battling himself. His performances hit so hard because they came from real pain. In his later years, he became a passionate fighter for Native American rights, even sending an Apache activist to refuse his Oscar as a protest against Hollywood's treatment of indigenous peoples. If Brando shook up Hollywood, our next star shocked the entire world with a revelation nobody saw coming. Rock Hudson, the perfect leading man's painful secret. Rock Hudson had it all: the height, the looks, the charm that made women swoon and men jealous. Born Roy Scherer Jr. in small-town Illinois, he grew up with an abusive stepfather who constantly put him down. Movies became his escape. He never dreamed he'd one day be up there on the screen himself. But this perfect leading man was living a lie. Back then, being gay could end your career faster than any scandal, so Hudson had no choice but to pretend. The studios carefully built his image. They even arranged a fake marriage to his secretary to stop the rumors. He couldn't be himself anywhere, not in public, not even really in private. Behind the scenes, he lived in constant fear. Friends had to keep secrets. Relationships had to stay hidden. He once said, "I just want to be loved, but I have to pretend to be someone else to earn it." In 1985, the truth came out in the most heartbreaking way. Hudson was diagnosed with AIDS, becoming one of the first major celebrities to reveal their diagnosis. The news shocked the world. It shattered the image of the all-American heartthrob and forced America to confront the AIDS crisis head-on. Some fans felt betrayed, others admired his courage, but nobody could ignore the impact. Hudson's announcement did more to humanize AIDS than any government campaign. It showed that this disease could affect anyone. He passed away that same year, but his final act, being honest about who he was, became his most powerful performance. Hudson wasn't the only star forced to hide. Let's talk about one of Hollywood's most beloved actresses who fell from grace overnight. Ingrid Bergman, when America's sweetheart broke their hearts. Ingrid Bergman was everything America wanted in a movie star. Beautiful, talented, and seemingly pure as snow. After Casablanca and The Bells of St. Mary's, audiences trusted her completely. She was the actress who could do no wrong. The Swedish beauty everyone admired. Then, in 1950, she did something that turned the whole country against her overnight. Bergman had gone to Italy to work with director Roberto Rossellini on a film called Stromboli. Both were married with children, Bergman to a Swedish doctor, Rossellini to a screenwriter. But on that volcanic island where they filmed, sparks flew between them. When Bergman became pregnant with Rossellini's child while still married, America lost its mind. The reaction was brutal. This wasn't just any actress. This was Ingrid Bergman, the woman they'd trusted to play nuns and noble heroines. A U.S. senator actually stood up on the Senate floor and denounced her as a powerful influence for evil. Churches boycotted her films, fan letters turned into hate mail, and Hollywood slammed its doors shut. What made it worse? Bergman didn't apologize. Instead of begging for forgiveness, she stood by her choices and moved to Italy with Rossellini. For 7 years, she was basically exiled from American movies, making artsy European films while her Hollywood career sat in ruins. The sad irony was that Bergman had always been exactly what she seemed: honest, passionate, and genuine. Her affair wasn't calculated or mean, it was simply human. But 1950s, America couldn't forgive their saint for being real. When she finally came back in 1956 and won an Oscar for Anastasia, the audience gave her a standing ovation that felt more like an apology. But the damage to her heart was already done. Speaking of damaged hearts, let me tell you about Hollywood's most tragic couple. Spencer Tracy and Katharine Hepburn, Love in the Shadows. Spencer Tracy looked like the ideal leading man, steady, dignified. That face you could trust. But Tracy carried a burden that broke his heart every single day. His firstborn son, John, was born deaf. And in those days, when people didn't understand deafness well, Tracy blamed himself. Off-screen, he was anything but calm. Tracy's life was a balancing act. He was a devout Catholic who wouldn't divorce his wife, even though he spent over 20 years in a relationship with Katharine Hepburn. To the public, they were just good friends. Behind closed doors, they were partners. The problem was, his personal struggles never let them truly be happy. Tracy had a serious drinking problem, not just a glass here and there, but the dangerous kind. Friends and co-workers knew the signs. He'd disappear for days, drink himself into oblivion, then show up ready to work like nothing happened. His guilt over John's deafness ate at him. He believed God was punishing him for his sins, and this religious torment fueled his drinking. On set, he could be charming one minute, vicious the next. Directors said working with him was like walking on broken glass. Despite everything, studios protected him. His talent was too valuable. And Hepburn, she often acted as his shield, but keeping up appearances wore him down. In private, Tracy battled guilt, shame, and depression. A man torn between his faith, his dependency, and the life he could never fully live. He passed away in 1967, just 2 weeks after finishing his last film. He often said he had demons, and they never let him go. Yet his wife, Louise, dedicated her life to helping deaf children, founding the John Tracy Clinic in 1942, which still helps families today. Tracy's demons were internal, but our next star's scandals played out for all to see. Lana Turner, the sweater girl's life of drama. Lana Turner's life was like something straight out of a soap opera. 8 marriages, countless affairs, and a violent incident that had the whole country glued to their newspapers. Discovered at 16, sipping a Coke at Schwab's pharmacy. Yes, that really happened. Turner became MGM's sweater girl, but her personal life? Way more complicated than that wholesome image suggested. Turner's childhood shaped everything that came after. When she was 9, her father lost his life in a card game, leaving her and her mother in poverty. That trauma followed her into adulthood, where she kept finding herself drawn to dangerous men who reminded her of the chaos she'd known as a child. Her marriages were disasters. Each husband seemed more controlling or abusive than the last, and Turner would escape one bad relationship only to fall right into another. Her most notorious relationship was with Johnny Stompanato, a violent man connected to Mickey Cohen's crime organization. Stompanato was possessive and brutal, threatening Turner's career and her safety. He'd show up on movie sets, intimidating directors and co-stars. And at home, he was physically abusive. Turner was trapped, too scared to leave, too proud to ask for help. Everything exploded on Good Friday, 1958, when Turner's 14-year-old daughter, Cheryl, witnessed Stompanato threatening to harm her mother. In a moment of terror and protective rage, Cheryl grabbed a kitchen knife and fatally wounded Stompanato. The trial that followed was a media circus. Turner broke down on the witness stand, describing years of abuse. Cheryl was ruled to have acted in justifiable defense, but the scandal hit Turner's career hard. What made Turner's story even sadder was her desperate search for love and stability. Each marriage was her trying to find the security she'd lost as a child, but her own pain led her straight to the men who'd hurt her most. She passed away in 1995, having survived 8 marriages, countless scandals, and a lifetime of tough choices. Proof of both Hollywood's power to create stars and its failure to protect them. Some stars burned bright and fast. This next one? She invented the blonde bombshell and paid the ultimate price. Jean Harlo, the original blonde bombshell's tragic end. Jean Harlo didn't just play the platinum blonde bombshell, she invented it. But the real woman behind all that peroxide was way more vulnerable than any character she played. Born Harlean Carpenter in Kansas City, she was pushed into Hollywood by her controlling mother, who saw dollar signs in her daughter's stunning looks. By 21, Harlo was a major star, but her personal life, one disaster after another. Her first marriage to Charles McGrew, a wealthy heir, turned abusive. Friends said he would hurt her physically, and Harlo started drinking heavily to cope. Her second marriage to producer Paul Byrne ended in tragedy when Byrne was found lifeless in their home just 2 months after the wedding, leaving a note suggesting personal inadequacies. The scandal nearly ended Harlo's career, with whispers that she had driven him to take his own life. Desperate for respectability, Harlo married cinematographer Harold Rawson, but that fell apart within a year too. Then came her passionate affair with married actor William Powell, one of the few relationships that brought her real happiness. But Powell wouldn't leave his wife, leaving Harlo heartbroken and leaning even more on alcohol. Behind that wisecracking, confident screen persona, Harlo was deeply insecure about her intelligence. She read constantly, trying to educate herself, and wrote poetry that almost nobody ever saw. She desperately wanted to be taken seriously, but Hollywood only wanted the platinum blonde bombshell. The end came shockingly fast. In 1937, at just 26, Harlo collapsed on the set of Saratoga. Her mother, a devout Christian Scientist, refused to let doctors treat her, believing prayer would cure what turned out to be kidney failure. By the time medical help was allowed, it was too late. Jean Harlo passed away in agony, the first major Hollywood star destroyed by the very fame she'd achieved. Her passing shocked the world and marked the end of an era she'd helped create. While Harlo's flame burned out too soon, our next star lived through scandal after scandal. Rita Hworth, the pinup girl who couldn't find real love. Rita Hworth was the ultimate fantasy. That gorgeous red hair, that famous pose that kept American soldiers company during World War II. Her dance in Gilda, it made her an international symbol of desire. But the real woman behind all that glamour was desperately searching for a love that always stayed just out of reach. Born Margarita Carmen Cancino to a Spanish dancer father who was both her teacher and her first abuser, Rita learned way too young that her body was her currency. Her father forced her to dance in nightclubs from age 12, and by some accounts, the abuse went beyond just being controlling. When she escaped into marriage at 18 to older businessman Edward Judson, she just traded one controlling man for another. Judson transformed her from Rita Cancino into Rita Hworth, dyeing her hair red and forcing her through painful procedures to change her hairline. Hollywood made her a star, but it also trapped her. Studio head Harry Cohn was obsessed with her, bugging her dressing room, following her private life like some kind of stalker. Hworth's marriages to Orson Welles and Prince Ali Khan were passionate but doomed. Her intelligence intimidated men who expected her to be the compliant fantasy from the screen. What made Hworth's story even more heartbreaking was her secret vulnerability. Despite her image as a confident goddess, she was painfully shy and insecure about her smarts. "Men go to bed with Gilda," she once said, "but wake up with me." The real Rita could never compete with the fantasy that made her famous. In her final years, Hworth developed Alzheimer's disease, though nobody diagnosed it for years. Hollywood just wrote off her increasingly confused behavior as alcoholism or mental problems. She passed away in 1987, largely forgotten by the industry that once worshipped her. Her daughter, Yasmin Aga Khan, became a passionate advocate for Alzheimer's research, determined that her mother's final suffering wouldn't be in vain. Hworth's life remains a cautionary tale about the price of being turned into a fantasy instead of being loved as a real person. Now, let me tell you about the king of comedy whose private life was anything but funny. Charlie Chaplin, the comic genius with a troubling side. Charlie Chaplin was comedy royalty. He built an empire with his silent films, that unforgettable mustache, and his ability to make people laugh and cry at the same time. But his childhood? Born into grinding poverty in London, his father abandoned the family early, and his mother Hannah suffered from severe mental illness that kept her in and out of institutions. Young Charlie and his brother were sent to workhouses twice before he turned 9. Behind that lovable tramp character was a man with a deeply controversial private life. Chaplin had a troubling pattern. He pursued teenage girls. At 35, he married 16-year-old Lita Gray, and the marriage quickly turned into a nightmare. Gray later said Chaplin was emotionally abusive and controlling. Things got worse when actress Joan Barry took him to court, claiming he fathered her child. Even though blood tests showed he wasn't the father, the judge ordered him to pay child support anyway. The media had a field day. Then came the politics. Chaplin was accused of being a communist sympathizer during the Red Scare, and the U.S. government made its position clear. In 1952, while he was traveling abroad, they banned him from coming back to America. He never officially became a U.S. citizen. "I remained just one thing, and one thing only, and that is a clown," Chaplin once said. But the truth was way more complicated. The world laughed at his performances, but his private behavior told a different story. Ironically, the man who made millions laugh struggled with deep depression throughout his life, possibly inherited from his mother's mental illness. Chaplin at least tried to hide his troubles. Our next star, he wore his chaos like a badge of honor. Mickey Rooney, the child star who never grew up. Mickey Rooney wasn't just a child star. He was the child star. In the 1930s and 40s, he ruled the box office with those Andy Hardy films, raking in millions before he was old enough to vote. Born Joe Yule Jr. to vaudeville performers, Mickey was performing professionally before he could walk. His childhood was spent on stages and movie sets, never in classrooms or playgrounds. At one point, he was the highest paid actor in America, but that spotlight that made him, it never let him go. Rooney's life was like a tornado of marriages, scandals, and bad decisions. 8 marriages to beauty queens, starlets, and actresses, including Ava Gardner, but love never seemed to stick around. His relationships usually ended in chaos, jealousy, and tabloid headlines. He gambled away fortunes more than once, falling into debt with casinos and shady characters who didn't believe in forgiveness. It wasn't just money slipping through his fingers. He trusted the wrong people, including family. His mother, Nell, was notoriously controlling and greedy. She managed his finances and spent like crazy while Mickey worked, leaving him virtually broke, despite earning millions. In his later years, he accused his own stepson of abuse and financial theft. The man who'd once been America's most lovable teen icon passed away battling not just time, but betrayal. On set, Rooney was unpredictable, fiery, stubborn, and often reckless. Directors dreaded his mood swings. He could be brilliant one moment, then vanish the next. He drank heavily, partied endlessly, and had the kind of energy that burned everyone out. "I never had a childhood," Rooney once said. "I just had a career. And boy, did it show." He never really outgrew the spotlight or the need to be adored. Well into his 90s, he was still chasing roles, still doing interviews, still performing. It was like stepping away would mean facing the life he'd never had. Hollywood gave him everything, but it also took pieces of him he never got back. He became a living reminder that child stardom can be both a blessing and a lifelong trap. Some stars survived their demons. Others, like the next legend on our list, left us way too soon. Montgomery Clift, the beautiful soul. Hollywood broke. Montgomery Clift might have been the most beautiful man ever to grace a movie screen. Those sensitive eyes, that vulnerability that seemed to come straight from his soul. Along with Brando, he brought method acting to Hollywood, changing movies forever. But behind that angelic face was a man fighting battles that were slowly destroying him. Born to a controlling mother who treated him more like a prize than a son, Clift learned early to hide his true feelings. He was gay in an era when that could end everything, and the constant need to stay hidden ate away at him. Friends described him as brilliant but deeply self-destructive, someone who seemed to be at war with his own beauty and talent. The beginning of the end came in 1956, when Clift crashed his car into a telephone pole, leaving a party at Elizabeth Taylor's house. His face was shattered, requiring extensive surgery that left him looking like a broken version of himself. But the real damage was internal. The accident led to a dependency on pain medications and alcohol that he never escaped. After the crash, Clift's performances became even more haunting, as if his physical pain had unlocked new depths of emotional truth. Elizabeth Taylor, who became his closest friend, would find him unconscious from pills and alcohol, sometimes having to revive him herself. She protected him fiercely, even threatening to quit films if studios wouldn't hire him, but she couldn't save him from himself. Directors learned to shoot his scenes early in the day, before the medications and alcohol took effect. His final films show a man clearly struggling, his speech slurred, movements uncertain, his beauty ravaged by his dependencies. When he passed away in 1966 at just 45 from a heart attack brought on by years of substance abuse, Hollywood lost one of its most gifted actors. Clift had given everything to his art, including his life, leaving behind performances that still move us to tears decades later. While Clift fought internal battles, our next rebel made chaos his calling card. Errol Flynn, Hollywood's most charming rogue. Errol Flynn wasn't just a movie star. He was like a wildfire in a tuxedo. With that chiseled jaw, Australian accent, and devil-may-care attitude, Flynn became Hollywood's go-to swashbuckler. But the real man, way more dangerous than any pirate he played on screen. Born in Tasmania to a marine biologist father, Flynn's childhood was marked by rebellious behavior that got him expelled from multiple schools in both Australia and England. By the early 1940s, his off-screen antics were making bigger headlines than his movies. In 1942, Flynn was charged with serious allegations involving 2 teenage girls. He was eventually acquitted, but his reputation took a hit. Later stories revealed hidden peepholes and mirrors in his mansion, installed so he could spy on guests during private moments. Creepy doesn't even begin to cover it. "I like my whiskey old and my women young," Flynn once boasted, and that line tells you everything. He was also rumored to be involved in drug smuggling and questionable wartime activities. Though no concrete evidence of Nazi connections ever surfaced, where there was smoke, Flynn was usually holding the match. Despite his wild reputation, Flynn was surprisingly well-read and wrote several books, including his autobiography that became a bestseller. By 50, his health had collapsed from years of alcohol and excess. He passed away in 1959 at age 50, surrounded by whispers, part legend, part cautionary tale. Flynn lived fast and left a complicated legacy. Our next star, he came and went like lightning. James Dean, the rebel who left too soon. James Dean had only 3 major films, but that was enough to make him immortal. With that rebel energy, brooding face, and restless spirit, Dean became the perfect symbol of teenage angst. But his restlessness came from deep pain. When he was just 9, his beloved mother Mildred passed away from cancer, devastating young Jimmy. His father, unable to cope, sent him to live with his aunt and uncle on their Indiana farm. That abandonment cut deep and shaped Dean's lifelong hunger for connection. Behind the myth was a young man with a dangerous streak he couldn't shake. Dean loved speed. He raced motorcycles, drove Porsches, lived for the thrill. People around him worried constantly. He'd ignore red lights, push engines to their limits, and laugh about how close he came to crashing. Friends said he had a reckless disregard for safety. He once told a journalist, "I live every day like I'm going to expire tomorrow, and maybe I will." In 1955, that line became prophecy. Driving his silver Porsche 550 Spider, he called Little Bastard, Dean crashed on a California highway and lost his life at just 24. The accident shocked the world, but also cemented his legend. Young, beautiful, and gone too soon. Ironically, Dean had been scheduled to appear on a TV safety campaign about reckless driving the week after his passing. Rumors swirled after his passing about his relationships, about powerful men in the studio system, about a curse on the car. None of it was ever confirmed, but the mystery only added to the myth. James Dean didn't just play the rebel, he was one. And like many rebels, he never made it past the first act. Dean's story was tragically short, but some stars managed to burn bright without burning out. John Barrymore, the great profile's great fall. John Barrymore was born into greatness. Part of the legendary Barrymore acting dynasty, he had the talent, the name, and the voice of a Shakespearean god. Yet the pressure of living up to the family name was crushing. His siblings Ethel and Lionel were already established stars, and John felt he had to outdo them all. In the 1920s and 30s, he was hailed as one of the greatest actors alive, but fame didn't satisfy him. Alcohol did. Barrymore's decline was heartbreaking to watch. At first, he was known for drinking in style, fancy cocktails, late-night parties, witty insults, but eventually, it turned darker. He started forgetting lines, missing rehearsals, showing up to sets drunk or not at all. He became a punchline. The man who once played Hamlet, now slurring through comedies just to pay the bills. Friends tried to help. He'd disappear for weeks at a time. When they found him, he was usually broke, disheveled, and surrounded by strangers. His home became a revolving door of chaos. One producer said, "John Barrymore was the only man I knew who could outdrink his own legacy." In his final years, Barrymore was so broken he needed cue cards to remember lines. He passed away owing massive debts, and his funeral was almost canceled because nobody could pay for it. But it wasn't just the drinking. Barrymore's behavior grew increasingly erratic. He'd pull vulgar pranks at high society parties, flirt shamelessly with married women, and insult studio heads to their faces. Eventually, he lost almost everything: his money, his career, even his dignity. He passed away in 1942 at age 60, completely broken by the world that once adored him. Barrymore's fall was personal. Our next scandal nearly destroyed Hollywood itself. Fatty Arbuckle, the scandal that changed everything. Roscoe Fatty Arbuckle was one of silent cinema's biggest stars, literally and figuratively. Beloved for his slapstick comedy, larger-than-life energy, and friendship with Chaplin. Despite his hefty frame, Arbuckle was surprisingly graceful and athletic. He could do backflips and was an accomplished dancer, but he struggled with his weight and the cruel jokes about his appearance throughout his career. But in 1921, everything came crashing down in one horrifying weekend. At a party in San Francisco, Arbuckle was accused of causing fatal injuries to actress Virginia Rappe. The press exploded. Headlines called him a monster. Church groups boycotted his films. Hollywood panicked. Arbuckle was arrested and dragged through 3 separate trials. Though he was eventually acquitted, the jury in the 3rd trial even issued a formal apology, saying there was not the slightest proof of guilt. The public had already decided. The damage was done. Studios cut ties. His films were banned. Arbuckle became the symbol of Hollywood excess, a target for politicians and moral crusaders who wanted to clean up the industry. Worse yet, he was blacklisted. Even under a fake name, he couldn't get decent work. He tried coming back, directing low-budget films, taking tiny roles, but the scandal followed him everywhere. The tragedy was that Arbuckle was known for his kindness to young performers and children. He often helped struggling actors financially and was considered one of the gentlest men in Hollywood. He passed away in 1933 of a heart attack, just hours after signing a new film contract, his first real chance at a comeback in over a decade. Arbuckle's fall was more than personal. It helped trigger the creation of the Hays Code, Hollywood's morality guidelines. It proved that fame, even for the biggest star, could vanish overnight. Arbuckle's tragedy was public, but some mysteries, like our next one, remain unsolved. George Reeves, Superman's mysterious end. George Reeves was America's first Superman, heroic, noble, unshakable. In a cruel irony, the man who played the invincible hero felt increasingly trapped by the role. Children would approach him expecting him to fly, and he worried he'd never be taken seriously as an actor again. But off camera, his real life was anything but heroic. In 1959, Reeves was found lifeless in his bedroom from a gunshot wound. It was quickly ruled self-inflicted, but many questioned this conclusion. The mystery has haunted Hollywood for decades. Reeves had been involved in a messy affair with Toni Mannix, wife of a powerful MGM executive with alleged underworld connections. After trying to break things off, Reeves began dating a younger woman. That's when things got complicated. Friends said he felt watched, followed, even threatened. Some claimed he wanted out of the business entirely. Others believed he was getting too close to exposing something big. In the months before his passing, Reeves had been unusually paranoid. He told friends he felt like someone was following him and had asked for police protection. On the night of the incident, Reeves was supposedly upstairs alone, but guests downstairs heard the shot. The crime scene raised questions. Investigators found no fingerprints on the gun, and the shell casing was found beneath his body. Theories flew fast. Was it foul play disguised as something else? A jealous lover? A studio hit? Even today, nobody knows for sure. What we do know is that Reeves, once a symbol of truth and justice, met his end surrounded by doubt. Superman was supposed to save people, one reporter wrote, but no one saved him. Speaking of hidden truths, let me tell you about another star forced to live a lie. Tab Hunter, the manufactured star who finally broke free. Tab Hunter looked like the perfect 1950s leading man. Blonde hair, sparkling smile, all-American charm. Born Arthur Gellion, Hunter was raised by a single mother who worked multiple jobs to support him. His absent father was a source of lifelong pain. But behind that poster-perfect image was a man forced to live a lie every single day. Hunter was gay, and in an era when that was career-ending, the studio did everything to keep it hidden. They arranged fake dates with starlets, staged photo ops for paparazzi, and publicists worked overtime, scrubbing any whisper of truth from the tabloids. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, Hunter was terrified, constantly worried he'd be exposed. He was once arrested at a gay party in the early 50s. If the press had gotten hold of that story, it would have destroyed everything. "I couldn't be who I was," he later said. "Not in that system. Not back then." For years, he lived two lives, one for the cameras, one behind locked doors. Eventually, the pressure cracked him. His fame started to fade, and Hollywood moved on. The constant fear and deception took a toll on Hunter's mental health. He battled depression and anxiety for years, only finding peace when he finally decided to tell his story. But Tab Hunter didn't disappear. In 2005, he finally told his story in a memoir, revealing the toll of years spent hiding. Fans were shocked, many were moved. He'd survived an industry that chewed people up for much less. As one critic wrote, "Tab Hunter wasn't just a heartthrob, he was a prisoner of the system. And somehow, he found a way to break out." Hunter found his freedom eventually. Our next star, he never stopped chasing the spotlight. Tony Curtis, the playboy who lost everything. Tony Curtis had it all: the looks, the charm, the talent. He starred in classics from Some Like It Hot to Spartacus. Born Bernard Schwartz in the Bronx to Hungarian immigrant parents, Curtis grew up in crushing poverty. His father was often absent, and his mother struggled to keep things together. Young Bernie joined a street gang for protection and spent time in reform school before discovering acting. Off-screen, he was living the Hollywood dream. But that dream came with a heavy price. Curtis had an obsession with fame and a hunger for pleasure that couldn't be satisfied. He claimed to have been intimate with hundreds of women, Marilyn Monroe among them. But the fun didn't stop there. Curtis developed a serious drug problem, diving deep into cocaine and other substances by the 70s. He once admitted, "If you remember the 70s, you weren't really there, and I barely was." His behavior became more erratic. He alienated directors, fought with producers, and burned through marriages like cigarette paper. He had 6 children, but some of them, including actress Jamie Lee Curtis, spoke publicly about how absent he was as a father. One daughter said she was completely cut out of his will out of spite. The pain of his childhood poverty never left Curtis. He was constantly trying to prove he deserved success, but nothing ever filled the emptiness inside. Even at his lowest, though, Curtis never lost that flash of charisma. In interviews, he was charming and self-aware, a man who knew exactly how far he'd fallen and how many bridges he'd burned. "I turned my life into a circus," he once said, "and sometimes I forgot who the ringmaster was." Curtis at least owned his mistakes. Our next rebel, he made no apologies. Robert Mitchum, Hollywood's original bad boy. Robert Mitchum had the kind of cool you couldn't fake, laid back, brooding, and effortlessly tough. He didn't just act like a rebel, he lived like one. Growing up during the Depression, Mitchum had been a drifter and laborer before discovering acting. He'd ridden freight trains, worked in coal mines, and even been arrested for vagrancy. In 1948, Mitchum got busted at a Hollywood party for smoking marijuana. In those days, that could have ended everything overnight, but Mitchum didn't flinch. "It's just like being busted for holding a beer," he said with a shrug. He spent time in jail, but instead of sinking him, the scandal turned him into a legend. Hollywood quickly realized danger only made Mitchum more desirable. That wasn't his only trouble. Mitchum was known for drunken bar fights, brawls on set, and talking back to directors. He hated playing by the rules, but audiences loved him for it. He once told a reporter, "The only difference between me and my characters is I don't shoot people." That line stuck because it felt true. Some stars had their secrets buried. Mitchum let his chaos roam free. Yet beneath the tough exterior, Mitchum was surprisingly intellectual. He read voraciously and wrote poetry that few people knew about. And yet, for all his recklessness, Mitchum still kept it somewhat controlled. And finally, the ladies' man who somehow made it through the chaos. Warren Beatty, the ultimate Hollywood player. Warren Beatty wasn't just a star. He was a force of nature, handsome, smooth, and magnetic. He didn't chase Hollywood, it chased him. Born Warren Beatty in Richmond, Virginia, he was the younger brother of actress Shirley MacLaine. Their sibling rivalry was legendary, with both competing for attention and success throughout their careers. And along the way, he left a trail of stories that made him as feared as he was desired. Beatty reportedly had relationships with numerous women, including co-stars, models, and public figures. But he wasn't just a ladies' man, he was a control freak. On set, directors struggled with him. Scripts were rewritten to fit his vision. If Beatty didn't like how a scene was going, he'd shut down production until he got his way. His relationships were famously short-lived, except for the one that lasted. Despite his reputation as Hollywood's greatest bachelor, Beatty was secretly seeking something deeper. Friends said he was looking for a woman who could match his intelligence and ambition. In the 1990s, he shocked everyone by settling down with Annette Bening. But by then, his reputation was already sealed. "I've never known anyone more charming," one actress said, "or more dangerous." Beatty could make or break a movie with one call. He understood Hollywood power like few ever have, and he used it to shape his own legend, sometimes for art, sometimes for ego. In the end, Warren Beatty didn't crash. He didn't burn out. He kept going, fueled by control, desire, and the need to be the center of every room he walked into. Because in old Hollywood, some stars fell, but a few, they ruled the chaos. You know what gets me? We watched these people on screen and thought we knew them. But the real stories? They're more dramatic than any script Hollywood could write. Thanks for taking this journey with me through old Hollywood's hidden history. If you enjoyed uncovering these secrets, make sure to subscribe. We're diving deep into more untold stories next week. Drop a comment and let me know. Did any of these revelations change how you see your favorite classic films? And remember, behind every perfect picture is a human story. See you next time.